Nate Mordo from Ubisoft? Brand manager for Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, you say? Why yes, I'd love to come over and play some multiplayer. Hi gang, I'm Greg Viederman, editor-in-chief of PC Gamer Magazine. While I'm off playing some multiplayer Dark Messiah, why don't you listen to what Nate has to say about the game? But before we do that, here's a little spot from Games Radar. We'll be right back.
Okay, my name is Nate Mordo, and I'm the brand manager for Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, and that's what we're here to talk about. Dark Messiah is a fantasy game using the Source engine that's essentially an action RPG, more on the action side of things, in a first-person perspective. The idea is we're going to throw you into a bunch of levels. You're going to cruise out there, kill orcs, kill wizards, kill what you need to kill, and find the Skull of Shadows, and learn a little bit about yourself along the way. Then there's a multiplayer, that's the single player. The multiplayer side of Dark Messiah is also really exciting. Apart from the standard sort of deathmatch, team deathmatch stuff, we've got what we're calling Crusade mode, which we're really excited about. And that's, you could say, a marriage of World of Warcraft's Battlegrounds with kind of a Battlefield 1942 command and control approach. In terms of Ubisoft's ability to revitalize a franchise, I think a good example is Prince of Persia, for which we released 3 titles recently, and they did really well. And what we tried to do with Might and Magic, or what we're trying to do, we started with Heroes 5, which just came out. And for those of you who know Heroes, it's a real, turn-based strategy franchise that was very popular, that sort of laid dormant for a while, and we released this sort of new entry in that product line. Dark Messiah is kind of a completely different direction we're taking, where we decided to introduce an action game to what was traditionally an RPG franchise. But it's not really an action game, it's kind of an action RPG. It's, the problem is people think action RPG, they think Diablo. We're trying to say we're action RPG, but we're really much more on the action side. Oblivion really opened the door for this idea of first-person action, where you're not just sort of clicking on your enemy, but you're actually, you're aiming, you're turning, you're seeing everything in, a view that's much more familiar to, say, an FPS player. So we thought that was a really interesting opportunity to take this Might and Magic franchise and turn it into this universe that we're going to invest in and just create, all sorts of genres, but they're all going to be linked thematically and story-wise. You're an apprentice wizard, Sereth, and you start out the story as you've been trained in sort of the ways of being a warrior, being a mage, and being an assassin. So that's your sort of 3 skill sets. And one of the things that I think really sets Dark Messiah apart from previous games that are in the fantasy universe, you're not sort of locked onto your path. It's not like, let's say, World of Warcraft, where if you're a rogue, and here's your sort of talent tree, and here's your advancement path. We do have the idea of evolving your character. We're calling it the skill evolution system, but you're not locked to one of the trees. Essentially, there's the warrior path, there's the rogue or assassin path, and there's the mage path, but you can sort of allocate your improvements along any of those or all of them. So you can sort of spread out over the 3 or go deeply into 1 or 2 of them, but you're not restricted to one or the other. So the idea is you start out as this apprentice wizard Sereth, and you've got these skills, and you've got sort of competing influences in your life. You've sort of got a good cop and a bad cop. You've got this young woman you meet who is going to be your sort of good influence, and then there's this sort of evil demon succubus who's going to be your bad influence. And the idea is you're going after this ancient artifact, the Skull of Shadows, and there's a prophecy involved, and let's just say there's some twists and turns. One of the things about the Might and Magic series, for those of you who know it, is that the stories were never actually connected. What we're definitely trying to do with this revitalization is to connect everything so things are related. So for those of you who play Heroes, the events that happen in Dark Messiah are all set about 20 years afterwards. So there's a direct sort of link between those 2 stories, even though they're completely different games. I mean, we're really taking advantage of the Source engine here. So, for all of you who've played cutting-edge FPS games like Half-Life 2 or the latest Quake or the latest Doom or, any of those, we're using that to the max, and the physics and everything that the Source engine brings. But what I think makes Dark Messiah fresh and keeps the fantasy genre interesting is this emphasis on action. People are really used to, okay, I'm dealing with orcs, I'm dealing with swords, I'm dealing with magic, I click around. It's more about sort of skill point allocation and trade-offs in traditional fantasy games, we're going really light on that stuff and we're really emphasizing the action. So we're hoping that this appeals both to someone who's into the RPG stuff with, you know, kind of a fresh approach, but also the guys who liked Half-Life 2 and the guys who like those kinds of shooter games, because really it's partly about reflexes. It's not just, you know, points and trade-offs. You know, you can be a warrior, you can be a mage, and you can be a rogue, but you can sort of be all of them all the time. So for one particular kill, you might go in with your daggers with a stealth approach, but you might go in as a warrior just charging in on the very next battle. Regardless of how you approach things, say you instigate a battle between orcs so they kill each other, or if you go in there and kill them all yourself, the outcome is always the same in terms of the experience you get. So you're not penalized by, let's say, sneaking past someone to get to your objective because you didn't kill them or something. And that's a little bit different from the traditional approach where it's like, you kill something, you get X number of experience points. Here it's sort of objective driven. We're trying to go for a modern fantasy look. So if you compare something like, let's say, a Conan the Barbarian, it's over-the-top sort of fantasy approach, to like a Lord of the Rings, which is very much kind of a realistic, dark, gritty fantasy where people die. You know, it's not, you know, fun, happy time all the time. I think it's a much more sort of balanced fantasy environment, and that's what we're going for. We sort of call it a modern fantasy. To me, Oblivion's a straight-ahead RPG. It's a game where, you know, you choose your path, you're sort of locked into a... You're not as rigidly locked in as previous RPGs, but it's really a game about what skills do I want to do and what skills do I want to sort of not focus on. You know, what kind of armor am I wearing? What is that, you know, how does that impact what I'm doing, et cetera. It's a lot of sort of mental calculations, or not even mental, I mean, just right on the screen, you're looking at your character pane all the time and figuring out what you should drop and what you should sell and what you should level up, et cetera. We want to really do away with a lot of that. We really want to keep really light on the point allocation. It's really about jumping in and shooting things and aiming and you know, figuring out sort of how to solve a problem tactically, much more like Half-Life 2 than it is like Oblivion. Whereas I feel like Oblivion is really more about a traditional RPG points trade-offs allocation approach. The exciting mode in terms of innovation, I think, is this Crusade mode. The idea here is you have two teams as usual, and there's 5 classes that are balanced. This is an aspect in which it's a little bit like Battlefield, which the classes are complementary. So there's a healing class, there's a class that's good at doing ranged damage, there's a class that's good at doing direct sort of melee damage, there's a stealth class, etc. So it's definitely about picking something that you like in terms of play style, and then you know, playing to your advantages and against the weaknesses of the other team. Then, so essentially it's a 5-stage map. You start in the center, and there's 2 maps behind you, if you will. That's sort of your territory. So the 2 zones behind the undead side is the undead territory, and similar for the human territory behind them. So the idea is it's kind of like this sumo match where, you know, through skillful play, you sort of push the other team back into their own territory until eventually you push them off the map and you've conquered their fortress. That's the sort of framework of it, but really I think what's exciting about it is this idea of the complementary classes, and that you can actually evolve your skill as you play. So you start out the round as, let's say you choose a warrior, and through sort of skillful play, you actually allocate points that you gain in your skill tree in multiplayer such that you actually have more skills towards the end of the battle, you become more powerful. That all resets, you know, on every session, but I think that's a really kind of a new thing. Usually you start out with what you start out with, and maybe you could draw a comparison to like a Halo or a shooter where you find sort of more powerful weapons, but really here you're gaining new skills, and we think that's kind of different. For those of you who are interested in trying the multiplayer, we're going to be doing an open beta test sometime later in the summer, so you should definitely look for that. And also there'll be a single player demo coming up soon too, so you kind of get to try both sides of the game. Okay, hey, thanks for letting me talk a little bit about this game. As you can see, I'm pretty excited about it, and I hope you guys will be too. Definitely look for the demo and the beta later in the summer, and look for the release of the game this fall.
So there you have it, gang. Hope you enjoyed the podcast this week and our interview with Nate Mordo. I had a great time playing the multiplayer, Dark Messiah. It's very different from any other shooter I've ever tried. I think you're going to like it a lot. The skills that you've learned, you've acquired over the years in games like Quake and Unreal are really going to help you so much in this one. So keep an eye out for Dark Messiah of Might and Magic coming this fall. And we'll see you soon on the next video podcast.